Marcus Wright stood nervously at the airport gate, clutching his first-class ticket tightly between his small fingers. The 10-year-old boy kept checking the large departure screen, making sure he was at the right place. This was his first time flying alone, and he was traveling to London to meet his father, who had promised him the best weekend ever. The airport was busy with people rushing in all directions. Some pulled large suitcases, others talked loudly on phones, and a few ran to catch flights. Marcus felt very small among all these adults. He wore his best clothes, a neat blue sweater, clean jeans, and his favorite sneakers that lit up when he walked. "Next passenger, please," called the flight attendant named Helen. She had blonde hair pulled back in a tight bun and wore a blue uniform with a small golden pin. Her smile disappeared quickly when Marcus stepped forward. "First class?" she questioned, looking at his ticket with doubt in her eyes. She glanced around. "Where are your parents, young man?" "My dad is waiting in London," Marcus explained politely. He stood up straight like his father had taught him. He arranged everything properly. "I have all my papers too." He reached into his small backpack to show her his passport and travel permission documents. Helen didn't even look at the papers. Instead, she frowned and examined the ticket suspiciously, turning it over several times. "This doesn't look right to me at all. A child alone in first class? This ticket must be fake." "It's not fake," Marcus said, his voice getting smaller. "My dad bought it for me. He's James Wright." Without any warning, Helen tore the ticket in half with a loud ripping sound. "Please step aside while I help actual passengers. Someone is clearly playing a prank." Marcus felt like his heart dropped to his stomach. "No! Please don't tear it," he cried, but it was too late. The pieces of his ticket were already in Helen's hands. "You can't board without a valid ticket," Helen said coldly. "Now please move aside." "Please call my dad," Marcus begged as tears formed in his eyes. "His name is James Wright. He's expecting me in London. Please." Instead of helping, Helen signaled to a security guard who was standing nearby. "We have a situation here," she called out. "This child is trying to board with what appears to be a fake ticket." The security guard, a tall man named Bill, came over. People in the line were now staring at Marcus, some with pity, others with annoyance at the delay. "What's going on here?" Bill asked. "This boy claims to have a first-class ticket, traveling alone," Helen explained with a dismissive tone. "It's clearly not legitimate." Marcus felt tears rolling down his cheeks now. "Please just call my dad. He can explain everything." Bill looked more understanding than Helen. "Do you have your father's phone number, son?" Marcus nodded and pulled out his own phone, finding his dad's contact. With shaking hands, he dialed the number. Meanwhile, in his London office, James Wright was checking his watch anxiously. As the owner of British Sky Airways, he had many responsibilities, but today his focus was on his son's arrival. When his phone rang with Marcus's name on the screen, relief washed over him. "Hello, son. Are you boarding now?" he answered cheerfully. The sound of Marcus crying made his heart sink immediately. "Dad," Marcus sobbed, "they tore up my ticket. They won't let me on the plane. They think I'm lying." James felt a rush of anger and concern. "Who won't let you on? Put them on the phone right now." Marcus handed his phone to Bill, who listened carefully as James spoke. The security guard's expression changed quickly from doubt to shock. "Yes, sir." "I understand, sir," Bill said, his face growing pale. "I'll handle this immediately." When Bill handed the phone back to Marcus, he bent down to the boy's level. "I'm very sorry about this misunderstanding. We're going to get you on that flight right away." Helen, who had been watching this exchange, looked confused. "What's going on?" Bill pulled her aside and whispered something in her ear. Helen's face drained of all color as she glanced back at Marcus with new eyes. "British Sky Airways." "Right." She mumbled, finally understanding whose ticket she had torn. Marcus wiped his tears, feeling a small sense of relief but still hurt by what had happened. He just wanted to see his dad and have the special weekend they had planned for so long. In his London office, James Wright stood up from his large desk and paced back and forth. His heart was racing after hearing his son crying on the phone. James was a tall man with kind eyes that now flashed with anger. As the owner of British Sky Airways, he rarely used his power to solve personal problems, but this was about his son. "Sarah, cancel my next meeting," he told his assistant. "I need to handle an urgent situation." James called the Manchester Airport terminal manager directly. "This is James Wright," he said firmly. "There's a situation at Gate 14 involving my son that needs your immediate attention." The terminal manager, Thomas Brown, nearly dropped his coffee when he heard the name. "Mr. Wright? I'll handle this personally, sir. Right away." Thomas rushed through the airport, his tie flapping behind him as he ran. He knew exactly who James Wright was, the man whose name was on his paychecks. The man who owned the entire airline. Back at the gate, Marcus sat alone on a bench, still wiping tears from his face. People walked past him, some giving him curious looks, others too busy to notice the sad boy. Marcus felt so small and alone. All he wanted was to see his dad. Helen was now speaking with her supervisor, a man named Paul, who looked increasingly worried as he checked something on his tablet. "Did you really tear his ticket?" Paul asked with wide eyes. "He's just a child," Helen defended herself. "Children don't fly first class alone." Paul showed her the screen on his tablet. "That's James Wright's son. The James Wright." Helen's face suddenly went pale. "British Sky Airways. Right." She mumbled, finally understanding what she had done. Thomas arrived, out of breath. "Marcus Wright," he called, looking around frantically. When he spotted the boy, he hurried over. "I'm terribly sorry for this misunderstanding. Your father has called us directly." Marcus looked up, his eyes still red from crying. "Can I still go to London? My dad is waiting." "Absolutely," Thomas assured him. "We're going to get you on the plane immediately. And we've arranged something special to make up for this unfortunate incident." As they walked toward the plane, Thomas whispered to another staff member, "That's the owner's son." The owner's son. Make sure everything is perfect. Helen stood frozen by the gate desk, her hands shaking slightly. Paul pulled her aside. "Do you realize what you've done?" he asked quietly. "I didn't know," Helen whispered, still in shock. "How was I supposed to know who he was?" "That's exactly the point," Paul replied. "We treat every passenger with respect, not just the ones with important parents." On the plane, a flight attendant named Mary guided Marcus to his first-class seat with gentle care. "Would you like a hot chocolate before takeoff?" she asked kindly. Marcus nodded, still feeling shaken by what had happened. The seat next to him was empty until an elderly man with white hair and friendly eyes approached. "Is this seat 2B?" the older man asked. "Yes, sir," Mary confirmed. The man sat down beside Marcus and smiled warmly. "Hello there, young man. I'm William. Looks like we'll be traveling companions today." "I'm Marcus," the boy replied quietly. William noticed the boy's red eyes. "Quite a commotion back at the gate, wasn't it?" "I saw what happened." Marcus looked down at his hands. "They thought I was lying." "People make mistakes," William said gently. "Sometimes grown-ups forget that children deserve respect too." Mary returned with a large mug of hot chocolate topped with whipped cream and chocolate sprinkles. "Special order for our VIP passenger," she said with a warm smile. As the plane prepared for takeoff, the captain's voice came over the speaker. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome aboard British Sky Airways Flight 403 to London. We have a very special passenger with us today, so please join me in ensuring this is a wonderful flight for everyone." Marcus knew the captain was talking about him, and he felt uncomfortable with the attention. He didn't want special treatment because of who his father was. He just wanted to be treated fairly from the start. William seemed to sense this. "You know," he said quietly, "in my experience, true character shows not when everything goes right, but when things go wrong. How are you feeling now?" I'm still sad, Marcus admitted. And a little angry too. That's perfectly understandable, William nodded. But I have a feeling you're going to handle this with more grace than most adults would. As the plane lifted off the ground, Marcus looked out the window at the shrinking buildings below. He thought about his dad waiting in London and the weekend they would spend together. He also thought about Helen and wondered what would happen to her because of the mistake she made. The plane reached its flying height, and Marcus felt a little calmer now. The hot chocolate had helped warm him up inside. William, the older man sitting next to him, was reading a book but would smile at Marcus every now and then. Marcus liked that William didn't ask too many questions or treat him differently. Have you been to London before? William finally asked, closing his book. Many times, Marcus answered. My dad lives there. I stay with my mom in Manchester during school time. Ah, I see, William nodded. I used to travel a lot for work myself. Airports can be stressful places, can't they? Marcus thought about what had happened at the gate and nodded. Today was the worst, he said quietly. The chief flight attendant, Robert, approached their seats. He was a tall man with a neat uniform and a friendly smile. Hello, Mr. Wright, he said to Marcus. I wanted to personally apologize for what happened earlier. Is there anything special I can get for you during the flight? Marcus thought for a moment. No thank you, he replied politely. I'm okay. When Robert left, William gave Marcus a curious look. Most people would ask for something when offered. Marcus shrugged. I don't want special things just because of who my dad is. William nodded with approval. That shows good character, young man. As the flight continued, Marcus looked out the window at the clouds. They looked like giant cotton balls floating in the blue sky. He wondered what his dad would say when he told him what happened at the airport. His dad usually stayed calm, but sometimes he got very serious when people were treated unfairly. Can I ask you something? Marcus said to William. Of course, William replied. If you owned a company, and one of your workers did something wrong to a customer, what would you do? William looked thoughtful. That's a big question. I suppose it would depend on why they did it. Was it an honest mistake? Were they having a bad day? Or do they always treat people poorly? Marcus considered this. What if they just made a wrong guess about someone? Ah, William nodded, seeming to understand. You're thinking about that flight attendant, aren't you? The one who tore your ticket? Marcus nodded. Well, William said, in my experience, good leaders don't just fire people for making mistakes. They help them learn from those mistakes. This made Marcus feel better. He didn't want Helen to lose her job because of him, even though she had made him cry and feel terrible. Halfway through the flight, Robert returned with a message. Marcus, the captain would like to invite you to see the cockpit. Would you be interested? Marcus's eyes lit up. Really? Yes, please. Robert led Marcus to the front of the plane. The cockpit door opened to reveal Captain Peter and his co-pilot Emma. The cockpit was filled with buttons, screens, and controls that looked exciting. Welcome, Marcus, Captain Peter said. I thought you might enjoy seeing how we fly this big bird. Marcus looked around in wonder. This is amazing. Would you like to sit in my seat for a minute? Captain Peter offered, standing up. Marcus carefully sat in the captain's chair. It felt huge compared to his small frame. Emma showed him what some of the basic instruments did, explaining in simple terms how they helped fly the plane. Do you like flying? Captain Peter asked. Yes, Marcus said. My dad says I might be a pilot someday if I want to. Your dad knows a lot about planes, Captain Peter said with a smile. Before Marcus left the cockpit, a thought came to him. Captain Peter, can I ask you something important? Of course, the captain replied. When we land, could you help me speak to my dad about something? I have an idea about Helen, the lady who tore my ticket. Captain Peter looked curious. What kind of idea? I don't think she should be fired, Marcus explained. I think she should learn better. My teacher says when someone does something wrong, it's a chance to learn. Captain Peter and Emma exchanged impressed looks. That's very thoughtful of you, Marcus, the captain said. Many adults wouldn't be so understanding after what happened. So you'll help me tell my dad? Marcus asked. I'll personally make sure your message gets to him, Captain Peter promised. As Marcus returned to his seat, William noticed the boy seemed different, more determined, more at peace. Enjoy the cockpit? William asked. Yes, Marcus replied. And I decided something important. Oh? What's that? I'm going to ask my dad not to fire Helen, Marcus said firmly. Everyone deserves a second chance. William smiled broadly. Now that, he said, is true leadership. As the plane began its descent toward London, Marcus felt butterflies in his stomach. He was excited to see his dad after many weeks apart, but he was also nervous about sharing his idea. Would his dad understand? Marcus knew his father could be strict about work rules. We will be landing in 10 minutes, Robert announced, walking through the cabin. Please return to your seats and fasten your seatbelts. William turned to Marcus. Are you looking forward to seeing your father? Yes, Marcus nodded. We have special plans for the weekend. Dad is taking me to see a football match tomorrow. My favorite team is playing. That sounds wonderful, William smiled. And have you decided what you'll say about the gate incident? Marcus took a deep breath. I think so. I'm a bit scared though. Dad might be really angry about what happened. Speaking from the heart is always brave, William said. And it seems to me that you have a very good heart, young man. The plane touched down smoothly on the runway. As it taxied to the gate, Marcus could see the London airport buildings coming closer. Somewhere in there, his dad was waiting for him. When the seatbelt sign turned off, Robert approached their seats again. Marcus, the captain asked me to let you know that he'll meet you at the exit. He'll walk with you to meet your father. Marcus thanked him and gathered his small backpack. He turned to William. It was nice meeting you. William shook Marcus's hand very formally. The pleasure was all mine. Remember what I said about true character showing when things go wrong. At the plane door, Captain Peter was waiting as promised. Ready to meet your dad? He asked with a kind smile. Marcus nodded, suddenly feeling very small again. The captain placed a gentle hand on his shoulder as they walked together through the jet bridge and into the terminal. James Wright was standing just beyond the security barrier, his tall figure easy to spot in the crowd. When he saw Marcus, his serious face broke into a wide smile. Marcus ran the last few steps and jumped into his father's arms. Dad, he cried, hugging him tightly. There's my boy, James said, lifting Marcus up even though he was getting too big for this. I missed you so much. For a moment, the earlier trouble was forgotten as father and son reunited. Then Captain Peter approached them. Mr. Wright, the captain said, extending his hand. I'm Peter Moore, the captain of today's flight. James set Marcus down and shook the captain's hand. Thank you for bringing my son safely to London. It was my pleasure, Captain Peter replied. Your son is quite remarkable. In fact, he has something important he'd like to discuss with you. James looked at Marcus with raised eyebrows. Is that so? What's on your mind, son? Marcus took a deep breath. It's about what happened at the Manchester airport. The lady who tore my ticket. James's expression darkened. Yes, I've already spoken with Thomas about that. It was completely unacceptable behavior. Dad, Marcus said carefully, I don't want her to be fired. James looked surprised. You don't? After how she treated you? Marcus shook his head. I think she made a mistake because she didn't think a kid like me should be in first class. She was wrong, but maybe she can learn. Captain Peter watched this exchange with quiet admiration. James Wright was known throughout the company as a tough but fair boss. How he would respond to his son's request would reveal much about the man behind the title. James knelt down to Marcus's eye level. You were treated unfairly, and you're asking for mercy for the person who did that. Why? Marcus thought about his answer carefully. Because firing her won't fix anything. But if she learns better, she might treat the next kid differently. James looked at his son for a long moment, his eyes filled with a mixture of surprise and pride. Then he stood up and turned to Captain Peter. It seems my son has some ideas about how we should handle this situation, James said. Captain, would you join us for lunch tomorrow? I think this deserves a longer conversation. I'd be honored, sir, Captain Peter replied. As they walked through the airport toward the exit, James kept his arm around Marcus's shoulders. So, he said, tell me more about this idea of yours. What exactly do you think should happen to Helen? Marcus looked up at his dad with hope in his eyes. I was thinking maybe she could help make a new training program. You know, to teach people not to judge others so quickly. James nodded thoughtfully. A training program instead of a punishment. That's actually quite brilliant, Marcus. You're not mad at me for asking? Marcus questioned. Mad? No, James smiled. I'm incredibly proud of you. Sometimes the greatest leadership comes from unexpected places. 2 months had passed since the incident at Manchester Airport. On a bright Monday morning, Helen stood nervously in front of a classroom at the British Sky Airways Training Centre in London. Her hands trembled slightly as she arranged her papers on the small desk. You'll do fine, said a voice from the doorway. Helen looked up to see Marcus and his father, James Wright, standing there. Mr. Wright, Marcus, Helen said, her voice catching slightly. I didn't expect you to be here today. James smiled. We wouldn't miss it. This was Marcus's idea, after all. The classroom began to fill with new flight attendants and airport staff. Helen took a deep breath as James stepped to the front of the room. Good morning, everyone, James began. I'm James Wright, and today marks the first day of our new Respect for All training program. This course was created because of a situation that happened to my son, Marcus. Marcus waved shyly from his seat in the front row. Some of the trainees whispered to each other, recognizing the owner's son. But instead of telling you about it myself, James continued, I'd like to introduce Helen Baker, who will be leading this training series. Helen stepped forward, her legs feeling like jelly. She looked at Marcus, who gave her an encouraging nod. 3 months ago, I made a terrible mistake, Helen began honestly. I judged a young passenger based on his age and appearance. I tore up his ticket because I didn't believe he belonged in first class. The room was silent as Helen shared the full story of what had happened that day. She didn't hide her actions or make excuses. What I didn't know, she continued, was that this boy was Marcus Wright, son of our company's owner. But that's not the point of this story. The point is that it shouldn't matter who he was. Marcus listened carefully. This was the first time he had heard Helen tell the story from her side. He felt proud seeing how much she had changed. When I realized my mistake, I was sure I would lose my job, Helen admitted. Instead, something amazing happened. Marcus asked his father not to fire me. He suggested this training program instead. During the lunch break, Marcus sat with his father in the small cafeteria. What do you think of the training so far? James asked. I think it's really good, Marcus replied, taking a bite of his sandwich. Helen seems different now. She is different, James agreed. Your idea changed her. And it will change our whole company. Later that afternoon, all the trainees took part in activities where they had to think about how they judge people. Helen had them wear blindfolds and try to guess things about each other just by talking. This is what happens when we rely on what we see instead of who a person really is, Helen explained as the group removed their blindfolds. We missed the full picture. At the end of the day, Helen approached Marcus and James as they prepared to leave. I wanted to thank you both again, she said sincerely. Especially you, Marcus. Most people would have wanted revenge after what I did. Marcus shrugged. My teacher says that when you fall down, the important part is how you get back up. Your teacher is very wise, Helen smiled. And so are you. As they walked to the car, Marcus looked up at his father. Dad, do you think the training will really help? I know it will, James assured him. In fact, we're already planning to make this part of the training for every employee at British Sky Airways. All because you chose kindness over anger. They got into their car and headed home through the busy London streets. Marcus watched the city pass by outside his window, thinking about everything that had happened since that scary day at the airport. Dad, Marcus said suddenly, do you think maybe next school holiday I could help with more training? I have some other ideas. James laughed. I think you have a future in this business, son. Maybe someday you'll be running the whole airline. Maybe, Marcus agreed. But first I want to make sure everyone gets treated right, no matter who they are. That night, as James tucked Marcus into bed at his London home, he sat on the edge of the mattress. I've been meaning to ask you something, he said. What made you decide to help Helen instead of punishing her? Marcus thought for a moment. Remember that man who sat next to me on the plane? William? He told me that true character shows when things go wrong. I just tried to show good character. James smiled and kissed his son's forehead. William was right. And you have the best character of anyone I know. As Marcus drifted off to sleep, he felt happy knowing that sometimes the worst days can lead to the best changes. Because of what happened to him, thousands of people would now learn to look beyond appearances and treat everyone with kindness and respect. And somewhere in Manchester, Helen was going home with a lighter heart, grateful for the second chance that had changed her life.